Hello. Good
Hi.
morning. How are you?
Great.
Doing good. Awesome. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for everybody in the audience, and thank you to our wonderful panelists for joining us. We're here to talk about the importance of investing in human capital. And I think it's a very important topic considering the time. But one of the reasons I was super excited to sit up here with the both of you today is I think you both obviously have a huge passion for this topic, but you're coming at it from different ways. And so I'd love for maybe each of you to give a little bit of background and perspective on how you got involved with this work.
Sure, I'll start. I got involved with this work because it mattered to me. I was a litigator for a decade before I started my first company, The Riveter, and then joined SaxWorks, which is a new membership club concept from Saks Fifth Avenue. And when I was a litigator, I often felt like I was treated like a commodity, like I wasn't a human, like I needed to show up and serve my clients and work for my bosses, and they didn't care if I was sick or I needed to go see my parents who lived in a different state. And for me, it really all came to a head when I became a mother. Are there a lot of mothers in the audience? So the workplace is not good to moms, which we all know. And when I became a mother, at base level, I wanted to see my kids. And when I worked at a desk in a corporate office with a commute, I really just didn't see my young children. And I thought there has to be a better way. And there have to be solutions that just aren't that complicated. I think we overcomplicate a lot of the discussions. And for me, it was like, could I work from home 1 day a week? Could I leave early 2 days a week? And I'll get my work done. There's something called the internet. I can do it from anywhere. But it was a no. It was a hard no. And so I thought, what if we created a workplace that really thought of women first, created it with the allyship of other genders, because you cannot change work for women unless other genders, specifically men, are involved. And that led me to create a company called The Riveter and build it in the image of what I wanted to see in the workplace. And now with SaxWorks, we get to do the same thing on a broader scale by bringing the knowledge that employees are humans first and that we have to think of each other that way.
I love that. That's awesome.
For me, as I shared a little bit earlier, it started with just an interest in myself, basically. How do I not become a statistic? I moved out at 15. All the odds are against me. And the only true way to rebel was figure out how to be happy. It was the only counterculture thing I had going, because my culture was really miserable. Which led me on this journey. And I love wisdom and I love learning. And I got a divorce at 40. I'm 47 now. And I was looking at, a life I didn't think I'd be having, single mom. I had a young boy at the time who was 4. And I knew that as a touring musician, touring full-time as a single mom was going to be difficult to give him any life with school and the normal things. And that I was looking at a pretty different life than what I thought. And could I create an income in a way that was meaningful to me that was outside of touring? And so I kind of looked at where the world was, and I looked where I was authentically and tried to find that intersection. And for me, it sounds dark, but it didn't feel dark. It was pain. The culture's in pain. We have drug abuse, opioid addiction, suicide rates, anxiety and depression rates across every single demographic. That between 2007 and 2018 were up 70%. That's pre-pandemic numbers. Hotlines have been up 800% during the pandemic. So these aren't acceptable numbers. We are the most advanced civilization in the history of our species, but we're the least happy. So we missed something along the way. I don't accept this as a definition of success. Our gross income, I forget the name because I'm a folk singer. It needs to include happiness. You guys tolerate me and I really appreciate it. You're like, that's adorable. And so I started getting really curious about how can I use existing structures to scale human tools that are going to make us all more productive. And I believe it's good for the bottom line. And one of the places I wanted to work was in pre-existing businesses. Because they're already structures, they're already there, they already have infrastructures, and there's people there, and I want to get a hold of people. And so started working on a culture curriculum based on proven scientific exercises that anybody can practice that help rewire you thanks to neuroplasticity. All it is practicing a new skill. And it's just what I built up my life becoming my own expert in because I needed it in my own life. And so her and I actually formed a partnership with Saks Works where we're starting to create this overlap of culture and the amazing pieces they have and culture and how I see it and coming together. Because I really believe that if you invest in the human and you solve a pain point for a human, whether it's parenting, whether it's their health, whether it's medical crises, if you solve those pain points in a meaningful way for your employees, they're going to show up to work better. You know, I can't help train you to be a better employee. That's not necessarily my expertise. And frankly, it's not the hardest part of the equation. Doing our job is often the easiest part of our day. It's everything we're bringing into our job that sucks our bandwidth. And so if we want more creative, more resilient, more entrepreneurial employees that are going to be leaning into more uncertain times, be able to pivot faster, all of our companies have to pivot faster, right? Things are moving so fast. We need humans that do that. And so to me, that's what's really exciting is how do we create that human?
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. So now I want to maybe get some perspective on maybe your personal experiences. So can each of you tell me about a time where someone did invest in you as a human first and the impact that it had on you?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many amazing examples of people who did invest in me as a human first. When I started my company, I didn't know this when I started my company, which is probably why I did it, because if you don't know the hardest parts, you're more willing to do something. But when you start a large company, you often raise venture capital. And venture capital is fuel to build, it's fuel to scale. And when I started my last company, I did not know this, but women receive 2% of venture capital dollars. So $98 of every 100 goes to a man, mostly, obviously, white men. I really had no idea what I was doing. When I set out to raise venture capital, I decided to build this big company and then realized what I had to do it and was like, oh, shoot, I won't curse. But I was really fortunate that I ran into a man who asked me to come speak to his class at the University of Washington. I was living in Seattle at the time, and I had no idea who he was. But he seemed really nice, and I said, sure, I'll do it, but I'd love you to come see my company, see what we're building before I come to your class, so that you can have an idea of what we'll talk about. So he came to visit me at the building, and I showed him around, and I talked to him about my idea, and he said, are you raising money? And I said, I'm trying to, not very well. And he said, well, I was a venture capitalist for 25 years. You've got an amazing idea, and I can tell you have no idea how to pitch it. And I said, okay, well, will you teach me? And he said, I will. And I said, and will you also invest $100,000 in my company? And he said, if you figure out how to pitch, I will. And he taught me how to pitch. He sat me down. He helped me create a deck. He taught me how to pitch. And he taught me how to ask for double what I wanted. And if he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to build my company. Just
Did you get 200,000 is what I'm wondering.
Not from him. I got 100 from him. Yeah. But I also got his service on my board, which was invaluable. And I think, small things like that, like what his name's John Zagula, he's amazing. What he did for me changed the course of my life because, I was able to build my last company, and from that I was able to join Saks Works, which is an incredible opportunity. And it might not have been a big thing to him, but it was completely transformative to me. And so, he treated me like a human, and it really helped. And I will also say this, I was pregnant at the time, and he didn't bat about that. It didn't bat an eyelash, and that's rare in the world.
Wow.
I had a strange path through life. I had a really traumatic childhood, moving out at 15. You don't do that if you trust adults. And so I had a strange path. I lived in Alaska very remotely. So I was a pretty isolated kid. There weren't mentors around. Nature, I think, was a real mentor to me, which sounds strange, but it was really a church for me. And I discovered how to be human and how to be resilient by studying nature. And so it's a strange thing to say nature really invested in me, but it really did. I liked to sit and study, and I looked at the forests. And forests have diversity, and that's why they've existed since the beginning of Earth. Diversity, resilience is basically diversity. That's all it is. We talk a lot about what is resilience. It's having something that, if you're a forest, a plant that does well in drought, having a plant that does well in floods, having a plant that does something for everything in between, because a forest doesn't get to control the weather. has to respond in real time and be in harmony and react and respond thoughtfully. And I realized I had to do that. You know, all I was given in my life was a hammer. You know that saying, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so I had to start building for me what was resiliency, which just meant skill sets, tool sets. And nature's never let me down. I do know a lot of great people. I was thinking while I was homeless, I almost died in the parking lot of an emergency room. I had kidney infection and I had sepsis. I didn't know I had sepsis. I just knew I was really sick. And they turned me away because I didn't have insurance. And I went out in my car. I was living in my car at the time, and I couldn't drive anywhere else. I was too sick. So I just crawled in the passenger seat, and I was vomiting all over myself. And that was it. I mean, I was near passing out, and somebody tapped on my window. I was covered in my own vomit. It was not my shining moment. And he opened the door, and I really don't honestly remember what he said. I just remember him handing me some antibiotics. And it saved my life. And he treated me for free for the entire year I was homeless. And he didn't look at me at pity. He didn't look at me. He just helped. And it was one of the first men that ever did it without trying to have sex with me. I was living in my car because I got fired from a job because the boss wanted to have sex with me, and I refused. And I was like, I'd rather be homeless. I will invest in myself. I will not compromise myself. And it's not that I did. Thank you. Thank you. And investing in myself that way and not selling out my character, it didn't look like it was going to pay off. It ended up leading me to my life's passion. It paid dividends that I never would have expected. And frankly, if I had stayed at that job, I don't think I would have found my purpose. And it was a hard way to get there, but I got there. And so even if you don't have somebody investing in you, and I hope we all do, and I do now, my business partner, his contingency for working with me was, he said, I'll work with you on one condition. I'm like, what? He goes, you have to rest. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, look what you've done tired. Like, what could you do rested? And he's held me to it. Like, when I look at my schedule, if there isn't a day in there for me to rest or work out or something, there's no participation. The whole team won't go along with me. That kind of allyship is so important, and I do have that now. But I do just want to say, if you don't happen to have it in your life, you don't have anyone else believing in you, it's okay. You got you. You believe in you. You know what you're capable of, and it can defy all odds because magic is real, and magic is in you. And when you know that, there's nothing that can leverage you. It's a really unstoppable thing.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. That kind of like finding that strength and that power within yourself. And what I love about each of your stories too is, you know, relatively small moments in time where someone made a different choice and how much of an impact it had on you for so long. I love those stories. So another question kind of tied to a similar topic. So can you tell me the flip side of that? Can you tell me about a time where someone maybe didn't invest in you as a human first, so a bit of an obstacle, and how you overcame that?
Sure. I feel like I keep telling these stories about being pregnant and having kids, but I have like 100 children. So a lot of my last decade of my career involves my kids. But I was working at a job, and I was a lawyer. And while I was on parental leave with one of my children, my boss quit. And so my colleague who was between me and my former boss was being promoted into that role. And I called him up and asked to come in during my leave to talk with him because I was very eager to say, well, maybe I'll get a promotion too, to his old role. So I went into my office, and I said, his office, and I said, congratulations, I'm so excited for you. I'm planning my return from my parental leave. Like, will I be considered for a promotion to your old position? And he said, well, we talked about it, and you just had a baby, so it's not the right time. And I was so stunned, and I didn't say anything. And I was like, oh, okay. And the truth is, I think he was a very good man, and I think he thought he might have been trying to protect me or help me. And he wasn't. He just denied me an opportunity that I could have had the choice to deny myself by not applying. But had I wanted it, I should have had the opportunity. And I did vote with my feet, and I left, and that's when I started my company. And I will say, on my way out, I told him I was starting a company, and he said, I think you're going to have a latte and stay home. Well, I'm here, so I did not.
What did he say?
I think you're going to have a latte and stay home.
Oh,
I know.
terrible.
But I'm here, and I think, But it's the point, I think, to what Jewel just said, if you don't have people around you who don't believe you, or if you have people who are meant to be your mentors or your bosses and to foster your career and they don't believe in you, you have you. You can do what you're capable of. You know what you can do, and you should just keep doing it.
Yes. Yes.
I think a lot of my life has been defined by. I think I started to like being underestimated. I guess you have to get there if you're going to be underestimated. So there's been a lot of those examples in my life. I think generally people are doing the best they can. They usually have good intentions. Very rarely is it a super malicious thing that is causing them to get in your way. But I probably would just have to harken back to like that biggest moment of that boss taking me aside. He took me out to lunch and he was acting kind of funny at lunch, and I thought I was not great at my job. And I thought he was going to be like, yo, you got to like do a better job. I was selling computer software on the phone. But he wasn't talking about it, and he just started acting funny. And I grew up singing in bars, so I knew a lot of the signs. And so I just kind of put on the table, I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are we here? And he just flat out propositioned me, and I joked it off. And kind of an expert as a female of joking those things off, saving their ego, doing it in a way that doesn't make them look just flat out embarrassed, because I have to preserve the relationship and find a way to move forward. And by 18, I was kind of an expert in it because of all the bar singing that I had done. And so it seemed fine, and I went to work the next day, and my paycheck was due. And so I'd actually just come in for my check, and my rent was due, and I was late a lot on my rent. I was really struggling. Like, I was stealing toilet paper. Every single cent I had was going to my rent, and I didn't have anything left for food or anything else. So I needed this paycheck, because my landlord was like, you're a nice kid, but if you can't pay your rent, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this time. So I went in for my paycheck, and I went into my boss's office, and he was sitting there looking at his papers, and I was like, hey, I'm here for my paycheck. And he kept looking at his papers, and I thought, he just needs a minute because he's in the middle of reading a paragraph or something. And so I kind of waited. I waited by the door, kind of out on the edge. And he didn't ever respond. And I said, hey, and I kind of stepped in, and I was like, I'm here for my paycheck. And he just ignored me. I went up to his desk. I was like, I'm here for my paycheck. He just kept ignoring me. He just kept looking at his papers like I was a ghost. He never once acknowledged me. I left horrified, scared. I was trauma triggering. I got in my car. I had a panic attack. I was supporting my mom, who was sick at the time, so I had to go tell my sick mom that we're getting kicked out of where we're living. And we both moved into our cars, and that was kind of the beginning of it. Then my car got stolen. That totally sucked. But I wasn't in it, so that could have been a lot worse. It can always be worse, and you always I can't tell you how many times I thought I hit a bottom, and then I hit another one, and I was like, damn, I had it so good. That last bottom actually wasn't that bad. I have learned to be grateful for everything, because I don't control life. I did thank that boss, though, in my liner notes of my first album. It was such a gift. You don't know how the world works. You don't know how the universe works. And I tell my son, I have a 10-year-old son, you don't get to control how life changes. You just get to choose how it changes you. And I want to help people choose how their life changes them.
Yes.
Has he ever gotten in touch with you?
He came to a show really early on back in San Diego, and he apologized, really sheepishly. And I was like, it's all good. Yeah. I won.
Yeah. I love that. It's fine. I'm winning. That's fantastic. So I think we have a little bit of time, so I'll maybe ask some additional questions. So I'd love to understand, what's the biggest lesson that you've ever learned in your line of work?
So mine is short and sweet, but I think about it every day. Somebody once told me when I was hesitant to ask for something, or I think I was about asking for a raise, and someone once said, just ask yourself, what would a mediocre white man do? But it's true, guys.
Yeah.
So, I think that was, it's men ask for more money, men ask for raises, men ask for promotions, and if we don't ask, we can't get it. So asking is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's wonderful. And you and I were actually just talking right before this. I was telling you that I became a better manager and mentor for women when I started managing men as well as women. Because a lot of the women that I was managing were very shy or reluctant to talk about pay or promotions. But when I realized when I had men also reporting to me, is I could say, look, the males are not shy, so you don't be shy, right? So, yeah, yeah.
Let's see. I learned so much. I guess I would want to say two things. You know, a lot of us are working in systems, whether we're men or women, you know, no matter what kind of company we are, the future isn't created yet. And so we're always being asked to create in a system that's difficult, no matter what. You know, whether we're a company trying to pivot. You know, if you look at the Fortune 500 list from 50 years ago, a couple companies are on it, very few. So I want long-term wins. I want long-term success. I wanted that as a songwriter. Not many women do that, especially female singer-songwriters. It's the men that sell out the venues still, and as amazing as Joni Mitchell is, she's not selling out those venues. So it's hard no matter what for all of us. It's hard for established businesses or artists to stay and pivot and be on our feet and be resilient. It's hard for startups. We all have things that we're trying to break through systems, no matter what we are. And to never underestimate the power of knowing your gut and what's right. And it's what we teach our kids. I have a youth foundation. You follow what you know is right, and magic will happen. And I've never seen it fail. I've never seen it fail for anyone. And it can be a revolution if it's aligned to what you know is right. It won't be easy, but it's amazing when the magic starts lining up and how many people I've seen it not only work for in my life, but for our kids who are just overcoming incredible odds. So I think that's probably what it's taught me the most.
Yeah.
I would add one more thing, too.
Yeah.
I think this plays off what you're saying, Jewel. When we talk about companies, another thing that I've learned on my own, I don't think anyone told me to do this, but was to look around when I was considering a position or a job and look at the longevity of the team I would be joining. There are very few companies like Kroger or P&G where people stay for decades.
Yeah.
But when you find a company like that, it means that they're doing something right, that they're treating their employees like humans, giving you opportunity for growth. And I think it's just a really important thing to consider when you're looking at your own career.
Yeah, and just to add on that a little bit, something else that I really learned in my life, I've walked a lot of weird lives. I grew up on a homestead with an outhouse. That's as country as it gets. And then I lived in the ghetto in Anchorage, and I was one of two white families, and I lived there for 5 years. And then I lived homeless, and I was just around a lot of homeless people. And then I became wildly successful in a very elite way and was around a stratosphere of humans I didn't even know existed. I've been lucky enough to see a lot of life. I have 50% of my fan base that's conservative and 50% almost down the middle that's wildly liberal. And the word tolerance gets thrown around a lot, and we all say we want it, but very few of us are willing to give it. It just has become, I want to be tolerated. I want my individualism to be tolerated. But when I have to tolerate you, I don't know how to hold space for the fact that we disagree without me thinking I'm a sellout for being your friend. And so I've had friends in the press that come out as homophobic. I mean, they just say the nastiest things. I'm not homophobic. So I have my friends calling me going, how the hell are you friends with somebody who's saying something so ignorant? And I'm like, because I'm trying to live my value of tolerance. I can't control everybody else's opinion. I can only show up as the best friend possible and hope that we're going to be a benefit to each other's lives. That doesn't make me a sellout to my values. I live my values. It's just that tolerance is one of them. And so monoculture is very dangerous. It's dangerous for me as one human, right? Because that's not resilience. If I only have one tool, it's not going to work. It's really dangerous in companies to have monoculture. And where I feel like the Me Too movement might have misstepped or we didn't convert was going from a revolutionary anger, which was justified and important, but then you have to create a conversion system where we include men, where we help educate men, where we go, they were raised how they were raised. It's not like someone's fault. It's a system that they're part of as much as we're part of. And we have to figure out how to hold space and have compassion and then create actionable tools for reform's not quite the right word, but it's as close as I can get, for changed behavior, because right now men are just scared. They don't know if that joke's allowed or not. And they just don't know. And so you just have to give people the benefit of the doubt. You have to keep reaching out to people that make you uncomfortable. You have to keep sitting down with somebody who wildly disagrees with you and find your common ground. And as employers, we have to keep understanding that a female's viewpoint is medicine, right? As my native relatives would say. Like, we each have our medicine, and women have a medicine. And we don't, I'm so thankful to the women that went before us that had to defeminize to show up in the workplace, that had to be masculine and rough. And I get why they did that, and I'm so grateful they did, and what a sacrifice that is. We don't have to do it as much anymore. We can show up with our different viewpoint, with thinking in circular terms, with win-win terms, with the ways I see patterns differently as a dyslexic person. We have to figure out what's special about each person's viewpoint, because that's going to build our company's resilience. They have really special things. Everybody does. And even if you're just self-serving, it's the smartest thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I really like that. Someone was telling me the other day that, there's the power of kind of leaning into change is changing how you think about difficulty and feeling uncomfortable and being almost comfortable being uncomfortable. So I love that. So, okay, so last wrap-up question. I really sparked to how you define power a few minutes ago. And so I'd really love for everybody to leave here kind of feeling empowered. And so what would be your kind of like ending advice to kind of have people leaving here feeling empowered as human capital?
So I circle back to this one more time, but I've learned over the past 10 years to take what people might see as a weakness and reframe it as a strength, if you believe it is a strength in your life. I think that motherhood is a strength. It has historically been seen as a weakness in the workforce. But to me, it's made me so much better. It's made me more empathetic. It's made me multitask. It's made me learn how to work on no sleep, which is not healthy, but I can do it. But it's made me just better, right? And so I use that when I talk about my work and my dedication and my leadership and how I'm good at what I do. Motherhood has been a big part of that. It isn't a weakness. So whatever that is for you, share that with people, that it's a strength, and reframe it, because that's how we change the world.
I really believe our outer life is affected by our inner life, and everything right now in life kind of teaches us the opposite. It's start on all the outer things, and hopefully you'll be happy. Try and exist within these systems, and if you do it good enough and perfectly enough, you'll be happy. And not that that isn't necessarily, there's truth to those. It's just power really comes from the inside. It really comes from your inner knowing. We've always worked against systems as humanity. It used to be in nature huddling around a fire. The system that was dangerous and scary was nature. There's always been things for us to overcome, and we're literally built for this. It's just right now the wild forest might be a structure that doesn't value women, or it might be the big wild forest is seeing an economy that's been based on linear thought. These companies now realizing if we're not sustainable, the young generation of consumers will not invest in us. They don't like us. So we all are being asked to confront pre-existing structures, whether it's in our emotional lives, whether it's from our emotional inheritance we got from our families of origin. It's just our job. And so that's also where the magic is. That's where you're going to find your power and your strength. You don't have to accept the status quo. You can keep what you like about it, and you can also find a way with grace and power to find a new way. And you will find allies. It doesn't have to be you against at war. with the system because that's a waste of energy. It can be with. You find your allies, you find a way to be a positive influence. People will rally around you to create that versus just being angry about it. And that type of allyship that attitude fosters is really powerful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is all that we have time for today. Please join me in giving our fantastic panelists a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you for your moderation.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.